The one thing that brought all of this into very sharp focus a couple of years ago was when a vulnerability was exploited in the most vital service we have in this country, which is the HSE. And it just caused absolute chaos. It was a vulnerability that cyber criminals love to exploit, the individual, the one mistake that allows them to get the keys to the kingdom. And we know how much it cost to restore health service. We knew how much of an impact it had on people's care. And we kind of vowed that it would never happen again. But that's easier said than done when you're dealing with an organisation the size and scale of the HSE. So to talk a little bit about what they have been doing and also how they can try and avoid a repeat of it happening again, will you please welcome from the HSE, their CISO, Mr. Neal Mullen, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning, everyone. Wouldn't be a conference if we didn't speak about the HSE attack. So I suppose I'm what they've hired. I'm the hiree to fix the problem and come up with some solutions. I'm glad to say that I've absorbed a fantastic team that really learned cybersecurity from the largest cyber attack globally ever happened. Some of them are, or most of them, all of them are really experts, finely tuned in their space. And some of the things that we spoke about earlier on, the speed to respond is incredibly fast. It's sort of, your head is spinning at speed. People are working on my team to respond to incidents, and it's paid dividend. So I'm not going to talk about technology. I'm not going to talk about what AV or whatever solution you should have. I'm going to talk about how we actually manage and get ready for the next event. So I'm Neal Mullen, I'm the CISO of the HSE. I suppose it wouldn't be, I couldn't start off by saying there isn't a silver bullet. I'm sorry for all the guys next door, they're going to tell you there is a silver bullet, there isn't a silver bullet. So you can buy all the products, maybe you might get a silver bullet down. I'm not the silver bullet. If you had 10 of me, there's not going to be a silver bullet. So we need to have a bit of a realization that this is a journey rather than a destination. We're never going to get there. It's constant, ever evolving, and I think Richard spoke about that. So I'm supposed to start off with what is the HSE and what is the Irish healthcare ecosystem, and what are the things that keep me up at night, things we spoke about during the session already. So the HSE is made up of many different organisations. In the centre, we have HSE Public, 6 regions, 52 acute hospitals, 4,500 sites. That is sort of the makeup of our primary area of coverage. And that is where we're on a day-by-day delivering services to that community. We move outside of that environment, we move into what's called a Section 8, or voluntary hospitals. That's where I came from. So I worked in St. Vincent's Healthcare Group for 7 or 8 years, many years ago. Always knew I worked in a voluntary hospital, never really realised the difference between a voluntary hospital and a statutory hospital. And there is quite a significant difference on governance oversight. So we've got, 39. We've got a number of those hospitals in place. I think there's 25 of those hospitals in place. Then we move outside that again. We move into what's called the Section 39, and these are sort of voluntary organisations that deliver services to patients, to the public on behalf of the HSE. They're not vendors. They are predominantly not-for-profit organisations that might pick your mother up and bring her for a treatment, or might offer your son counselling, that type of service. Those organisations tend to be from the 25 IT users to 2,000 IT users, often don't have an IT person. I haven't met one security person in any of those organisations yet. They're essentially out in the wild, is what I described it as. We move to that to one side, we have in the private sector delivering services to us again, 17 affiliated groups, a number of private hospitals, and on the far side, we've got a heavy dependency on technology providers. And one of the speakers before spoke about change and the impact on change, and we are using change as an example of how our vendor risk process failed. And not just ours, but every other healthcare organisation in the globe. No one predicted that change could be hit by an attack, and not just hit by an attack, but couldn't actually survive the attack. Change provides X-ray services to the HSE. And without those services, that would be one of our critical systems would be down. So that's sort of where we are from a physical perspective. We move into the journey we've gone on since the cyber attack. So we had a cyber attack May 2021. At that point, the board brought in a temporary Chief Technical Transformation Officer and a temporary CISO. They were both from Big Four, and they were there, brought in temporarily to stand things up. We had our first post-incident review, about 250 findings identified in there. Some of them are gaping holes, some of them are process, some of them are procedure orientated. And then we started off on the journey of continuous assessment around NIST Cybersecurity Framework 1.1. And we started off with a fairly modest response of 1.18. And over the years, we've grown that up to 2.2. And this year, I have an objective of hitting 2.5. In October of last year, I was hired as a CISO. And I've been building the team that I have with me around me, and I've been building the processes and procedures that we're using to support the public sector. And that has led to the National Cybersecurity Program, which I had signed off 2 weeks ago, and this is the program that I'm delivering to the nation. And I'll sort of touch on some key points in that. I can't go into too much detail. So, if you think about our problem statement, we have a lot of inputs, and I sort of had to sanitize this somewhat. We have our original National Cybersecurity Compliance Report, which outlined a number of findings, 2 of which are still open. We have the National Maturity Assessment that I've gone through that we're increased to 2.2. We now have the latest National Cybersecurity Audit that was done last year. We have our ICT program and cyber program, which I've taken over, and I've taken over the budget and the running of that. And then we have new frameworks like the EU Commission and Cybersecurity Action Plan for Healthcare, who essentially want me to be able to provide them information back to them, which means it's another mouth to feed, it's another person to answer questions to, and it's really taken me away from doing what I'm meant to be doing. We need to align to the strategy. So I didn't write the strategy. I put my name to it a few weeks ago. It's gone from draft to final version now. It's a comprehensive document. It's well written. That's our strategic intent for cybersecurity, and we need to align with my boss's digital for care strategy. Digital for care, for those who don't know, it would mean we're exclusively moving into the digital space away from paper. And this is sort of compounding the challenge we have with cyber. So this is sort of the problem statement. We have regulations like NIS2 coming on board. We have a cyber posture. We're planning for 0-day events. We have Big Four advice that are hitting our board directly, well-intended advice, but nonetheless, that feeds down to me to another problem I need to answer. We have audits, findings galore, and we have our continuous assessments. So I can't fix this in the way that the HSE normally take the approach. I was like, what we did to get to where we are today isn't what we need to do to get to where we need to be. And if I spend my whole day going from Billy to Jack, closing down findings here, there, and everywhere, and we're never going to change. All we're doing is moving the problem down the road. But I fix it for you. The next day we ask you the question, and you get the question wrong, and so on and so forth. So it's sort of compounded itself, and it sort of turns into its own ecosystem, and we need to break that. And to say that as an approach didn't go down too well when I said it first. It's sort of gone down well now. The approach has been taken on board that we need to look at our direction of where we want to be, rather than where we are the second, and closing out things incrementally. So if we look at the systemic problem, if we actually deliver on our strategy, we will close those findings by nature. But we won't close it for the person that was found with, we'll close it for the nation, which is a big change, and a big change in approach. So the nirvana, what is the nirvana? Reduce complexity, increase capability. How does one achieve that? We have a finite budget, we have a finite team, we have finite resources, we're building good partnerships with people. Many of you in the room, when the cyber attack hit, I'm sure many of you in the room were involved in the response to it. And as Richard spoke about, nation events. We've attended them as well. And if there was a nation event, we don't have the whole room of everyone to ask to come and help us. You guys are going to be helping every other public sector body. So, the approach that I wanted to take is use the likes of NIS2 to our benefit rather than have it as our slave. And what does that mean? So I'm looking at, harmonization of rules, clear responsibilities, defining an objective, delivering on that, streamlining our response, and really simplifying our approach and delivering a risk-based approach. So risk and resilience are two words that we'll speak a lot about, things that I'm very passionate about. And if we want to deliver this, we need to have a robust, predictable, repeatable response. And we need to have a robust capability and understanding of how to recover. So this journey from cyber security to cyber resilience is a quantum leap for many organizations. It is a totally different approach to cyber security. So I'm hell-bent on using frameworks for our advantage rather than to break us down. Because the frameworks that we're using and the frameworks that are being pushed upon us, we are taking control by control, framework by framework, recommendation by recommendation, finding by finding, and it's just rolling up into like hundreds, if not thousands, of activities I have to do, and it's not actually making us more secure. By default, we will become more secure, but we're not strategically becoming more secure. So what I'm interested in doing at the HSE, and what I've done in previous jobs, is looking at how we use frameworks for us, rather than being slave to those frameworks. What that means is, and the format is slightly off here, sorry, but when we look at the frameworks that we're talking about using, typically 3 generations of frameworks. We have control frameworks like NIST 853, our personal favorite, says critical security controls, says benchmarking. These are sort of the technical controls. If you're looking at a key for a door, give you the specification of a key, how's the key built, what sort of measurements do you need, what torque is it capable of delivering upon. And that's sort of like going to turn into the how and the standard on what we're going to do. So you move into program controls, ISO 27001, NIST cybersecurity framework, and into risk controls where we talk about the likes of ISO 27005 or 31000. And MITRE ATT&CK, using MITRE ATT&CK to see if we had the same Conti attack again, looking at the tactics and techniques, can we actually detect and prevent those if they happen again? So, then moving into how do we actually use documentation for us? And this is sort of important where we get into the realms of where Richard is. So Richard is auditing me, not personally, but Richard's team audited me amongst other people. And one area that we've not done well on is our procedures documentation. So we need to develop 4, or what we are doing is developing 4 levels of documentation. So policies and strategies, what is our North Star? Where are we going to? How do we get there? The procedures talking about how we deliver upon that. What is our vehicle to get to where we want to be? The standards are talking about how we measure if we achieved that, if we delivered that, what does good look like? And evidence, delivering that. We've actually done that. We've delivered that control. We're moving on to the next control. So if you think back to the frameworks, what I want to do, or what I'm doing, is taking individual controls from individual frameworks and using frameworks to support us, to provide the smallest number of controls we can use and reuse them for CMMI, and reuse them for the National Cybersecurity Centre, and reuse them for the European Commission, and reuse them for internal health, or internal audit, and so on and so forth. So the frameworks that we are using, so CIS, CISO controls. Actionable and prioritized controls. These are sort of bread and butter cybersecurity controls. Into ISO 27001, we're using that to define what type of documentation that we use. What principles do we need? What procedures do we need? 27005, how do we approach cyber risk? And how do we measure cyber risk? How do we quantify cyber risk? 22301, how do we move into a more resilient space, and how do we actually deliver upon a resilient framework? And so on and so forth. So the approach of that is we're moving away from handwritten controls that I can only ever use once. We're moving into framework controls that we can stand behind, defend, and argue, our capability on. We can stand over them, and we reduce the number of activities. This is freeing us up to do more proactive activities rather than looking at like the reactive response where we are now. So improving that capability means that we need to move away from everyone in the room has their own version of their own laptop and their own security and their own principles. Everyone in the room can do whatever they want to do with their devices and so forth. And we need to move into a more consistent approach so that when we have a cyber incident, we're treating this side of the room the exact same way we're treating that side of the room. We don't spend the first days, hours, weeks figuring out what's the difference between you guys over there and what's the difference between you guys over here. We need to move away from that approach. So we need to move away from that inconsistency of delivery, inconsistency of measurement, and assign a risk-based approach to deliver upon a framework that meets your operational requirements but delivers a cybersecurity approach. And only when we get to this point will we really begin to deliver. So the consistent cyber protection, and I said I wasn't going to talk on technology, but we sort of obviously need to understand that we need to have proactive defense, so regularly updating systems. I've only got 5, okay. Streamlining response and so forth. So these are a given. So what's the outcome from taking this approach? The outcome from taking this approach is that we can deliver a response that is highly customized to our environment, our settings, our equipment, our users. So it becomes very predictable and very repeatable. And if you think of the HSE event, all communications were down. So hospital A didn't know what hospital B were doing, room 1 didn't know what room 2 were doing, and that sort of becomes quite a stressful environment to be in. I can't imagine what it must have been like. So when you have that level of predictability, it means that you, as a CISO for your organization in the HSE, you know what's expected of you, you know what we're doing at that time frame, and it comes out into more of a repeatable activity. So we've moved away from every version of the color of the can into all of our cans are silver. May seem a little bit boring, but unfortunately, the size of the organization, we don't really have much of an approach to do it otherwise. So what that means is we have reduced our complexity. We've got less variations of the same activity, less variations of the same technology, less variations of the same build, less variations of the same incident response, disaster recovery planning, capabilities, and so forth. We have an increased capability to be able to react to, respond to, and plan for future events. So when the next 0 day comes about, we don't spend hours, days, weeks finding out where is that 0 day present in our environment. We know up front. We know very quickly. And if you think back to the likes of like Log4j, I don't know how many people spent Christmas Day searching on a network to see if you had a Log4j. That's incredibly inefficient if the attacker is, imminent. So we need to be able to be in a situation that our capability is able to deliver on our response, which is really important. So with that, I'm finished my presentation. I'd like to thank everyone for your time and listening to me. This is the approach the HSE is taking from a procedure, documentation, evidencing, and controlling. Thank you.